how I was able to get off all my psychiatric medications that I've been on for 10 years. So this is a common question that I get, because I think there's a lot of people out there that are heavily dependent on different psychiatric meds. Now, there's, again, nothing against those things. You know, if someone is using those things and they feel like they help them and it gives you a better quality of life, so be it. But for me, you know, being diagnosed with bipolar disorder, severe social anxiety, ADHD, and then being medicated for a decade with Prozac and then lithium carbonate for bipolar, benzodiazepines for the anxiety, which are things like Valium and stuff like that, and then Ritalin for the ADHD, which is kind of like Adderall. Those things, they're uppers, they're downers, they're sedators. And to be honest with you, I just found that all they did was numb me. Like, I didn't feel excessive amounts of sorrow or pain, but I didn't feel happiness or joy either. It was a gray area. You don't feel the highs, but you don't feel the lows. And I think for certain people, maybe there's a point in time where that's needed. You know, the lows are so low that you would rather just be in a gray area and not experience those rock bottom lows. But one of the things that I'll tell you is I do think that those lowest lows can teach us a lot about life. And they also really help you appreciate the highs. And you cannot experience those highs if you do not experience those lows. I've just come to that conclusion in my life. And for instance, last week, my wife, Lauren, had a miscarriage. And that's, talk about lows. I mean, that's a low. If you know, that's the loss right there. And that being said, it makes you appreciate the highs. Like, I look at my daughter Zia, and it makes me truly appreciate her. I look at Lauren, my wife, it makes me appreciate her even more. Those highs, man, you don't feel them if you're numb to the lows. And it's and I remind myself, it's part of the human experience. And I think we're almost conditioned to think that if you feel sad or down, that something's wrong with you, that you're broken. And I don't actually think that's the case. I think it's part of just the human experience. And if we can frame it that way, we can understand that it's okay to feel that way. So from a tactical standpoint, how did I go from being medicated for a decade to being medication free for now 12 years? Because I would tell you that most people have not done what I've done. Most people have not walked that path. They're stuck on meds. You know, they're stuck on meds long term. And I think there's a lot of people out there who don't want to feel that way. And they're dying to get off these things. But they just do not know how. So I found for me a couple of things. Now, back then, I did things a little bit differently than I would do now. So now, with the knowledge I have now, I would do things slightly differently. Back then, I basically just communicated with my psychiatrist. I told him that I had a desire to sort of to wean myself away from as many things as I could. And from memory, because it is a while ago now, from memory, I started to taper down on the Ritalin and the benzodiazepines first. So I chose those two things first because it's like an upper and a downer. I was more concerned about the lithium carbonate for the bipolar, so I stayed on that one longer. But I weaned myself down on the first two. So for instance, I would go from a full dose in that first week to a 3/4 dose the next week, and then a 2/3 dose the next week, and then a half dose the next week, down to a 1/4 dose. And then I did a 1/4 dose every second day. And then I did a 1/4 dose every third day. And I think from memory from there, that's when I really was able to kind of get off those things. And that's when I did the same process with the lithium carbonate for bipolar. Now, I made sure a couple of things. So I made sure that I was getting to bed early and I was sleeping really well. I made sure that I was resistance training and working out. And I made sure at the time my diet was as clean as I thought it could be. Now, my perspective and understanding and knowledge on nutrition's changed a lot over the years. So at the time, what I thought was good, in my opinion now, wouldn't be that great, but it was way better than what I'd been doing. Now, why did I focus on those things? Because those things are what drive a lot of the chemical changes in your body. So if you're feeling like shit, part of it is because you're not moving enough, you're not getting enough sun exposure, you're not sleeping well. You're probably not sleeping well because maybe you're consuming alcohol, too many stimulants, caffeine, your diet's crap. So you need to start like weaning yourself away from a lot of those things. That being said, if I was going to do the same process now, what I would do first is I would get extensive blood work done. So I'd get a comprehensive blood panel done to see what's happening with my hormone systems, my thyroid, all these different systems in the body that can drive energy and mood and vitality. I would have a look at those things first, because if there was any abnormalities with, say, total testosterone, free testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, DHEA, pregnenolone, different hormones, there are different foods and supplements you can use to help optimize those things that will improve the quality of your life. Now, if you can improve the quality of your well-being while you're weaning yourself away from the pharmaceuticals, you will feel better. So that's the first thing I would have done if I had that knowledge back then. The second thing that I would have done was I would have done the Braverman test. So Braverman, Braverman test. It's a free test online. And again, it's just an estimation. It's not super accurate, but it will ask you a series of questions about your experience. And what it deduces from that is your approximate brain chemistry. So, where are you at with your GABA, your acetylcholine, your dopamine, your serotonin? Now, I would have done that too, because if you start pulling pharmaceuticals out and you notice that your dopamine is crashing, or certain neurochemicals crashing based on this test, there are certain foods or supplements, herbal supplements even, that you can add into your routine to help you stimulate those neurochemical responses. So it's almost like a bridging technique. You're basically using these tests to figure out what's happening in your body chemically, where you can use foods and lifestyle adaptations and herbal supplements, things like that, to create like a bridging effect, to bridge yourself over to the goal that you want to achieve without having to be stuck on the pharmaceuticals. Now, one of the things that I'll tell you is like a big part of this is your mindset. If you convince yourself that I'm always going to be this way, I'm just stuck like this is just who I am, it's genetic. If you convince yourself of those things, guess what? If you argue for your limitations, you get to keep them. So it's very, very important that when you're going through this, you recognize that you can change a lot of things about yourself. And I would say lastly, to focus heavily on your environment. Like if you are around a bunch of alcoholic imbeciles and people with negative mindsets and addictions, and they eat a bunch of junk food and they're all fat and overweight, you're going to have a hard time. You have to get to a place where your diet and your health are intertwined with your environment and the people around you too. So that's the take-home point. Now, in hindsight, if you can do all that, if you can get around the right people, if you can do the Braverman test, if you can do the blood work, and you communicate with your psychiatrist, and you can wean and taper down, you can potentially have massive success with this. And I will tell you, it changed my life. 12 years on now, I don't think any of those diagnoses are inherently true anymore. Doesn't mean that I am struggle-free. Absolutely not. If you look at my stories on Facebook and Instagram, you'll see that I post every single day my morning routine, my workouts, my self-care stuff, and I do it because if I do not fill my day with positive things, I will fill it with negative shit. And it has to be that way. So it is a long-term maintenance thing, but the highs you will experience are so much more beautiful than just being grey, than just being numb to the world. But you have to have that vision for yourself. And be willing to walk a path less traveled, and be willing to not accept the status quo, and be willing to not accept a label that's been imposed on you. So if you have any questions about what I did, or you need any help, please just reach out.